how did you come up to start writing the chapter?
Yeah, so it's an area of research that we've been working on for quite a few years, and as we get, I mean, in other parts of the book dealing with other aspects of repro management, as we get better and better control of programs and technologies for inseminating cows and for trying to optimize their fertility right around breeding, understanding that we really want to set them up for success. We can have the best synchronization program or the best activity monitors or the best inseminator, but if the cow has lived through a really difficult metabolic experience or health experience in the transition period, that's going to make it much harder for her to get pregnant and stay pregnant. So we've been working, and lots of other people have been working for quite a few years on understanding some of those links. So we know transition's super important, but maybe we're only starting to understand better is what the cow lives through even before calving, at calving, and the weeks after calving makes a big, big influence for her, even 2 months, 3 months later when we're trying to get her pregnant. So things like, to take one example that we've done a bunch of work, ketosis. So maybe 40% of cows live through subclinical ketosis in early lactation, and depending on the severity, duration, and so on, that has different effects in the short term. And even if you did nothing about it, the ketosis would eventually go away. So the cow's not ketotic anymore when we go to breed her. But what we've learned is that the fact that she lived through that before makes a big difference, or at least it makes a difference to her fertility later on. So we talk about some of the ways to monitor and treat and so on.
I remember a lot of previous research where you kind of was, determining, hey, what is the concentration that is associated with some of these disorders? Like I remember displacement of abomasum, and then going to commercial farms and drawing upon a lot of blood samples before calving, after calving, during the transition period, to determine, especially focus on NIFA and BHB. Even at that time, I think Precision Extra and blood ketone bodies was something that was available. And then that was something that was done before to kind of capture those associations, right?
Yeah, that's right. We've got a bunch of really good tools now that are actually practical and really accurate for producers, advisors to check the ketosis prevalence and status of their cows. And the handheld blood meters that are designed for people with diabetes, those work really well for cows. There's milk test strips, and now in many areas you can get milk BHB testing with your DHIA testing as well. The problem with that one is if you're only doing it once a month, you're going to miss some important information. But in any case, there's lots of ways to monitor that. And yeah, again, we've done a whole bunch of those big studies on commercial farms to try to identify those cut points. Really roughly on the blood, it's going to be around 1.1 millimoles per liter. That's the cut point that's associated with increased risk of bad stuff, be it disease or worse fertility. In milk, it's the absolute concentration is lower, so it's going to be around 0.1 millimole or 0.15 millimole. But again, that sort of puts the cow in a bit higher risk category. One of the big debates is always, a high-producing cow makes some ketones. That's part of how she adapts to support herself, to move some body weight to support milk. So to a point, a little bit of ketosis is actually a good thing. But at a certain point, if they're doing that too much, it kicks them into a higher risk category for bad stuff in the short term or the longer term.
I see. And then for research purposes, you draw blood from all those cows enrolled, but that commercial farm right now, for example, are they doing some kind of a subsample, or did they go to keep doing it in milk, or what they are doing now aside from the research just to practice?
Yeah. So several of those farms, not all of them, but a lot of them have kept going with individual cow testing, some with the blood, some switched to doing the milk test strips that you do by hand. They found that a little more convenient. They could do it in the parlor. And either of those work quite well. As I said before, the DHI milk ketone testing is really convenient, and for sure having that information is much better than nothing for kind of a herd level trends from month to month. But because you're only checking the cows, once every 4 or 5 weeks when you have a DHI test, yeah, it's much better than nothing, but it's not really good enough for picking individual cows and so on. So in a large herd, for looking at trends over time, it's a nice tool. In a smaller, medium-sized herd, or even in a large herd, it doesn't really get you to that individual intervention, which is probably where a lot of the value would lie.
Mm-hmm. And then one thing that I found pretty interesting is that if you have the cows have blood BHB greater than 1.2 and glucose less than 2.2, then we would have an injection of 5 milligrams of vitamin B12 for the days in addition to the treatment with propylene glycol, as you described the other two before. So why would that be the B12 plus? Now you are checking that glucose and BHB relation.
So that was, I mean, not totally surprising, but that was the first time that a large study had added this information about blood glucose in ketotic cows. And what we found was that among the ketotic cows, a little more than 1/3 of them also had low blood glucose. I mean, all fresh cows have pretty low blood glucose, lower than a person, but kind of normal for a fresh cow. But ketotic cows, again, about 35% of them have really quite low blood glucose. And that's a bad thing for them. It turns out that all of their outcomes, milk and subsequent health and so on, and likelihood to cure from ketosis, was all worse if they were a low glucose cow. And a couple of other research groups have since found the same thing, that about 35% of ketotic cows also have low blood glucose on top. And so we used a commercial injectable product that had a few ingredients, but it seems the key one is vitamin B12. And interestingly, the biochemistry of how that works is not completely understood, but the hypothesis is that the B12, well, we know that the B12 is an important factor in a couple of the enzymes in the TCA cycle. So to make a long story short, it looks plausible that in those low glucose cows, we give them the B12, and perhaps it's helping make up a little deficit in their ability to generate energy in general and glucose in particular.